Disclaimer, trigger warning. The We Are One podcast aims to shed light on the abuse experience within the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. The stories shared are from survivors who bravely recount their personal experiences. It is important to note that unless an abuser has been convicted in a court of law, they are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The podcast does not serve as a legal judgment, but rather is a platform for survivors to share their truth. Welcome to the We Are One podcast. Let's jump right into today's episode. Here's your hosts, Olivia and Jennifer.
We invite you to stay tuned for the next hour to hear one of God's great preachers, evangelist Lester Roloff.
It's an insult to God's work and God's people that support these homes to accuse us of doing irreparable damage to children when we make no charge. And we've done nothing but love them and lift them and teach them to sing the praises of God. Girls, do you love Jesus?
Oh, yes, we love Jesus.
Are you sure, Jesus?
Yes, we're sure we love Jesus.
Hi, welcome back to the We Are One podcast. I'm your host, Olivia.
And I'm Jen.
And so starting off this episode, we found it important to give the history of Lester Roloff and who he is. Definitely because like season one, I got a lot of feedback that, to have more history involved, explain, whoever we're talking about, when we bring up like Jack Hyles and stuff, definitely in like an IFB world, we're obviously well known, like they're well known and we know who they are, but for the outside world to understand and know who they are. So Jen and I thought it would be beneficial for season two, before we kick off our Lester Roloff series, to sit down and just give a little history episode of who he is and his enterprises and how they're still functioning today as of September 6th, 2024. And so, we're really excited to kick off this series. Jen, do you have anything before I?
Yeah, I just think, I think that it's very eye-opening. I know as a kid, I heard of Lester Roloff. I heard of the some of the homes, mainly the Rebecca homes. I just think that, again, it goes back to the fact that a lot of these, men of God, so-called, are not who y'all think they are. And this information is readily available online, and we're going to put the links in there at the end, and you guys can check those out for yourself and do your own research and your own deep dive. But, like I say before, just please listen to this with an open mind, and don't, shut it off immediately because you disagree with what people have said about a particular pastor or a particular person that you have idolized all your life, or you were told that this person is really a good person and they were just, wrongfully accused of something. When you have multiple cases that have been proven in a court of law, you can't deny it any longer, guys. So we're gonna go over the history of basically how Lester Roloff started and a little bit of the history, and then we'll discuss it. And I think you're gonna be pretty shocked to hear the stories of the survivors of some of these homes in this season, because it's really, really sad. I can't, as a parent, I have 3 kids. 2 of them are adolescent and 1 is a teenager. And I just cannot imagine what would possess some of these parents. And I'm going to emphasize the word possess, to send their child to one of these homes. When you find out what has happened at some of these homes, you're just going to be absolutely floored. So with that, that's my 2 cents right there.
Yeah,
I'll have more.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're 2 yappers. No, seriously though, I feel the same way. I mean, I'm not a parent, but I'm just like, I take care of children for a living, and I'm like, I could never, like, I just don't get it. And I also know that there's obviously a huge generation change within this timeline, and I feel like unfortunately a lot of parents probably in the 40s and 50s and 60s just thought they were, looking up to this man of God, and oh, he's going to do great things for my kid, whatever. In reality, they just were following blindly, and it's really sad. I think what's crazy to me is like the fact that it's still happening. Like this isn't like, oh, it happened in the 1960s and it's done with. There's just maybe a hand select of people who have trauma from it. No, it literally is still existing.
Mhm.
And it's just crazy. I don't know, I just feel like there's so many different alternatives of discipline than to ever send a child to any of these homes. And so that's where I stand on that. And I mean, I have a lot of more opinions, but like you said, we'll share them.
Yeah.
So to start it off, Lester Roloff was born in Texas in 1914. Lester Roloff attended Baylor University and Southern Baptist School. Lester Roloff began in 1944. He was a radio host. The show was called The Family Altar, which a lot of people probably definitely in like the older generations, probably I'm saying like 60s, 70s would remember that. Like maybe your grandparents, you were in the IFB.
Yeah. Like I've heard that. I've definitely heard about the radio show that he had, The Family Altar. And just from what we've talked about with the survivors that we have spoken with, that this was played on a loop in the dormitories, like his sermons and the radio show where he would be preaching over and over and over and over again, almost like a torture tactic.
Yeah.
Brainwashing tactic.
And it's a pattern too. When you hear survivors like from these homes, these ranches, I covered Circle of Hope Girls Ranch a little bit in season 1. I still plan on to do more of that. And other ranches, like again, what we're doing now with Lester Roloff's, there's obviously a huge pattern of these isolation rooms, starved to death, beaten, abused in every form of way with, but they always have that preaching that's in the corner and it's blaring.
Vicious, but we know that the devil doesn't like to see little girls. He can take a little girl and make a bunch of people fall. Did you know that? He can take a little girl.
It's like you said, it's a tactic, and obviously we can't say that Lester Roloff was the one who started all these tactics. I think that would be kind of far-fetched, but the fact that it goes back to like farther time, I think it just proves that this has been happening for decades, and it's not just happening now. This is happening like like for me, like my grandparents' era.
He did know what was going on, because as we go through the history, some of his comments that he makes in court, these are court, recorded, he has said, they're on the internet. Look them up. I mean, we're not making this stuff up. And the things that he has said, it's appalling. So he's definitely not innocent in all this, but there are other characters within that whole realm that do play a part for sure. Other, adults and stuff. So yeah.
And I personally would be confident enough to say that I wholeheartely believe that Lester Roloff had to do some part of abuse. His point of view on discipline.
Oh yeah, yeah.
1951, he started his own evangelistic enterprises. Roloff actually broke from the Southern Baptist Convention in 1950s. He didn't agree with like the way the Southern Baptist was moving. He wanted more of the fundamental, funny that word pops up, theology and like teachings and stuff. And so he broke that in the 1950s.
I know that was around the same time that Jack Hyles broke from the Southern Baptist Convention, as well as other churches that were quite prominent within the IFB. They didn't like, there was a big dispute, but they basically didn't like the way the direction the Southern Baptist Convention was going. And they also I don't think they really wanted to be affiliated with any, organization per se. So hence independent fundamental Baptist, which we all know isn't technically independent because they're all part of essentially a cult, and they all kind of have there's 4 or 5 main dudes in this movement that kind of shape the whole thing. So
and I think that's really important. I'm so glad you just said that. Oh, we're independent, like we have no affiliation. But in reality, a lot of people think that in the IFB. They really strongly believe that, because I was once that person. And then when you again, like we're saying, sit back, research, take the time to figure out, all this. And again, this is why we're doing this podcast, is to bring light of this. Then people can realize that actually what you're tied into. And so I think it just goes back to following blindly, like a cult does. You're brainwashed, and nobody will change my mind that it is a cult, because it is a cult. 1954, Roloff returned to Corpus Christi, Texas to pastor a IFB church. Roloff established his first mission home for alcoholic and homeless men also. And one of the main things that he actually purchased while he was alive was a plane. And,
I believe he had 3 in total.
Me?
Like Kenneth Copeland, he has to have a plane.
I'm
he can't be flying around in a commercial airliner Kenneth Copeland says he can't be flying around in a commercial airliner in a tube full of demons. That's why he's got to have his private plane. So hey, maybe Lester Roloff was thinking the same thing. He's got to have his private plane. He cannot be in a tube full of demons and 30,000 feet up in the air.
Yeah, instead he just saying that he's going to scam people and get love gifts and money, so then he can become a millionaire, fly around his plane, have young girls on there. Yeah, I think we've seen this before.
I mean, sounds very familiar to things that have been in the news the last few years. I'm just saying.
1961, he actually resigned from pastoral duties and became an evangelist. And
more lucrative to become an evangelist.
No, because he needed to be more of a predator. Come on. Come on, Jen, we know this story. And then in 1967, also, this is what pointed out to like us, is the timeline and dates, like how like this man had to be like a chicken with his head cut off. Here, who, like, I'm like, oh my gosh. And I know it's like 3 to 5 years and in between, but I'm just like, that's a lot. Like, boy was busy.
Well, hey, when you have people literally sending in like their jewelry and deeds to their houses and boats and everything, you got to do something with all that. You know what I mean? Like,
that's true.
Why not just build a bunch of homes and go around and get more money from these churches and support from these people? You know?
So in 1967, he started actually another church named People Baptist Church in Corpus Christi. So he was like, you know what, I'm not going to be evangelist anymore. I'm going to go back to pastoral. And he started another church.
Isn't that funny though? The People's Baptist Church.
It's given stupid vibes, but and so then 1968 is when I feel like Lester Roloff, granted he was a radio host, he was well known. I mean, people, like you said, people were giving jewelry, people, I mean, like big amount of donations that could help, give him money or whatever type of thing. And so then in 1968 he actually started or established the Rebecca Home for Girls.
Thank you, Lord, for the service that we was in this morning.
Well, it's, efficient for the body to make it function properly.
And that became like the crown jewel for Roloff. That's what got him like really well known, because after that was established is when it just took off even more. And we actually sit down next week's episode with a survivor from Rebecca's home.
More than 550 acres of land being used by Brother Roloff and the People's Baptist Church to build and maintain homes for people in trouble. You will see all 5 homes, Rebecca and Jubilee for girls and ladies, the Anchor, the Lighthouse, and the City of Refuge.
Down in a coastal waterway, at a place called the Lighthouse, that's operated for about 1/5 of a century.
Homes. It is in these most unusual homes that we work with some of the most difficult people in the world. This is the Jubilee Home for ladies, 18 and above.
When the girls come here, they usually haven't had proper training in the things that help young girls in their future lives as a wife, a mother, a lady.
Wonderful Psalm 121.
Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes to the hills, from which comes my help. My help comes from.
Yeah, so he started that in the Rebecca home, and you will hear next week's episode with the survivor, and bring tissues.
So I'll continue with some of the history here. So Roloff had obviously his private planes that he would take to these, churches and convince them to donate love offerings and love gifts to his little empire that he had there. In 1973, the state of Texas investigated allegations of abuse in the Rebecca home when there was a parent that was visiting one of the girls and actually saw another girl getting whipped. That was reported to the authorities, and then it was investigated. Then welfare workers came, and Roloff didn't let them in. They denied them entry. So then Attorney General John Hill filed a lawsuit against the Roloff Enterprises. He had received about 16 affidavits from girls who were former residents of the Rebecca home. So the girls had reported in the affidavits that they were whipped. They were with leather straps, beaten with paddles, and handcuffed to drain pipes. They were also put in isolation cells. That they said that a lot of residents, former residents, had stated that they were beaten up to 50 to 100 times in a single beating.
January of 1977 to August of 1977, Sharon was a resident of Lester Roloff's Rebecca Home for Girls, an institution she compares with a correction center. During that 6-month period, Ms. Oliver says she was terrified, afraid of spankings and punishment for minor infractions. Sharon says the school, which looks neat and clean on the outside, is really unhealthy, both mentally and physically. Medical care was especially limited and lax.
Then the state of Texas prosecuted Roloff, and during a hearing on behalf of the 16 of the Rebecca home girls, he stated, quote, this is a quote from Lester Roloff, "Better a pink bottom than a black soul."
One of the strangest things that happened while I was down there was a couple of girls drank toilet bowl cleaner trying to commit suicide, and they wouldn't take them to the hospital. And what they did was they laid them down in the living room on the couches, and they called us all down there, and we were to pray for them. And I and lots of other girls just couldn't handle it very well. It was a very bad situation watching them lay there and suffer like they were, and knowing that they weren't going to be helped. And finally they were taken to the hospital, but it was after they knew that they had to be taken. And
now, if you're listening to this and you're still okay with Lester Roloff, you probably need to get your head examined.
And one of them will never be able to have children again. She had half of her stomach removed. And it was a bad experience, but that was one of the worst while I was down there.
Unless girls became violently sick, Sharon says most of the young women had to serve 6-month terms with monitored monthly phone calls and censored letters from parents only.
So some of the homes were temporarily shut down because Lester Roloff refused to license the homes through the state. He didn't want the state coming in and you know, I don't like the government either, you guys. I get that. But I mean, let's just be honest. Okay. I'm just being transparent. Olivia's laughing at me. I don't like the government either, but there is a reason that they can go in and like, actually, if there's accusations going on of abuse, then they should probably check it out. So anyway, Lester Roloff, he was later found in contempt of court and went to jail for 5 days.
I want you to know you're working. If I never come out of the jail, you'd still be working. You live for Christ and give your testimony. Everything will be all right. Amen? Romans 8:28. 5.
He appealed the closing of the home, which actually ruled in his favor. Came down to the whole separation of church and state type of deal. And so he won that in the state of Texas.
I believe that he's already committed himself to the principle of separation of church and state and constitutional government. If that be true, he'd not only help Brother Roloff, he'd help everybody. The state never had any business in the church in the first place, any more than the church had any business in the state.
But the legal battles would continue through the years, and in 1979, Roloff conceded that he failed to report an attempted murder, okay, at the Rebecca homes. He failed to report it. So a group of girls, about 5 girls, almost stabbed another girl to death. Roloff apparently was quoted to refer to the 5 girls as, quote, my little murderers, and stated that he personally punished them with a good thrashing. I do believe he said, because it was quoted, that he said, quote, my little murderers. So then it's like, okay, this is all over the news. It's starting to catch like national news now. Now it's out there. Like, what is happening in Texas? What's happening at this crazy home? People are starting to take notice. Obviously, the Attorney General in Texas is involved. He's been to court multiple times. Now it's national news. So what does Roloff do? He calls up all his homies in the IFB and says, come support us. The government's trying to shut us down.
All of his homies come down, and
all his homies.
And you know what? Even politicians came.
Yeah, because they were very involved in politics. They were very involved.
They were very involved, yeah.
But they were.
Yeah, they were very involved with that. And
now, of course, we could not express enough gratitude to Bill Clement.
And so they had politicians there. They had anybody who pretty much, I would say, like gave them like a love gift in that way, donation, churches, any of it, to come and form a human shield. 1979, the Christian Alamo is literally tied with Lester Roloff.
That's what they call it. You can Google it.
So it's called the Christian Alamo, and it happened in 1979, where Roloff urged his supporting churches across America, including politicians at the time, to come, form a human shield, chain, whatever you want to say, handing around to prevent the Texas Department of Human Resources from removing the children in the home.
Ministers, parents, and workers joined by Bibles to block the entrance to the church. The children are inside.
Okay, hey, wait a minute, fellas. Let's take the Texas flag over there and put the American flag right here, okay?
This is just a practice run to make sure everyone knows his place. Fort Worth Minister Jerry Stout.
This is a matter of separation of church and state.
I know it lasted a couple days situation.
Yeah, there's one of the ladies that we do talk to for one of the episodes. I believe she said she thought it lasted 5 days. Mm-hmm. But I think her mom came and got her on like day 2 or something, and she was able to leave.
She got out like the first day or something.
Second day, yeah. Her and her mom had to stay overnight in the church They were there for like 24 hours or so. Just they couldn't leave. It was blocked off. Nobody could leave. And it was just, I can't even imagine. You guys, this is just, it's a cult. It's freaking crazy.
It is crazy. And you know what? It's really sad is there's still people going to comment and say that he's such a good person.
Unlicensed children's homes.
We don't want the children to have to leave. We don't want the homes to have to close. Amen. We support Brother Roloff 100%.
Okay, well, those people are just like Jim Jones. You're drinking the Kool-Aid, okay? Just go drink the Kool-Aid.
We cover a little bit more about like the survivors timeline after the Christian Alamo in next week's episode. So like I don't want to give too many details or spoilers, but we do talk about that and like how it was in Texas. And again, if you're from Texas and you're hearing, like, you more than likely know about it, hear about it, because it was such a huge thing. Roloff died in a plane crash on November 2nd, 1982.
At 8:45 a.m., Brother Roloff got in the plane and flew away.
And it's just ironic, you know, that he died in a plane crash. And he, you know, was leaving a multi-million-dollar empire built on abuse by money he extorted from participating or otherwise like gullible churches, and started to participate in funding the enterprises, even though he's gone. We also talk about when Lester Roloff died, how like everybody, definitely like me who was in the IFB, you would just think, oh, because he's dead, okay, well then all these places would close down, all this. No. Again, they're very much alive. They are operating, functioning. He left an empire, a multi-million-dollar empire that was built on abuse, and it's still happening. And it happened to so many other people. In reality, churches should have probably took a step back and said, what did we just do? Definitely after the Christian Alamo, like, what is going on? And unfortunately, that did not happen. And they fell for it and kept on supporting and giving to the enterprises. And again, they're still functioning. Did you know that Lester Roloff traveled around the world singing with the honeybees to get love gifts?
The Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God.
Also, that he was like, there was only women on the plane that when he died. So I think it's just funny how they always talk about to staff, like IFB pastors, you never to be alone with the girl, you know, the same, you know, the genders can't be, you know, no mixed swimming, no holding it, nothing. But then you have him who was literally on a plane with only all women. Ironic, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that funny? I mean, stuff obviously went on. I think if you are listening to this and you're still, and you, maybe it triggers you, maybe you get angry, maybe you get angry at us for saying this stuff or bringing this to light, you might, I'm just going to give you one of your lines. You probably need to pray about it. Because if you're defending these people, you need to really like examine why. Maybe something in your childhood that is actually triggering you to defend these people.
Like that whole mindset, I just don't understand. Like, yes, we're aware that this happened or this, you know, was not taken care of, but we're going to stay. I'm sorry, but what are you subjecting your child to? And then you wonder 10 years later why your kid wants nothing to do with you. Well, bingo, what's it mean?
Wants nothing to do with God. I think too is people get so comfortable with it's okay. So I've been I was in an abusive marriage, right? So people would often say to abuse people who are being abused, like, why don't you just leave? Why are you still there? If you know this is going on, why are you still there? Well, a lot of times there's a mental block and you're like, but I don't know what's on the other side of this. It could be worse, but it could be better. Mm-hmm. And you break, you're at your break. That's what had to happen to me. I was at my breaking point. I was like, I am not living like this anymore. I refuse. Like you get one life and one life only. And I am not going to live in this abusive situation. And I'm also not going to allow my daughter, who was an infant at the time, to be exposed to this abusive behavior. If you can drop your paradigms, you guys, and just let all of what you think things are supposed to be, or what you think a certain pastor is, or whatever, you got to drop all that. And once you do, you can literally become like a new person, and you can have a new life. I'm talking about the IFB. I'm talking about the legalism. I'm talking about what you think about women wearing pants. Why do you think that? Or is it because some pastor hammered on the pulpit and screamed at y'all your whole life and told you women wearing pants is wrong and a woman that wears pants is a whore and Jezebels and all that? Your relationship with God has to be a personal one. It can't be what some pastor tells you it has to be, or a parent tells you it has to be. Because at the end of the day, you're going to one day meet your maker face to face, and there's nobody else that's going to be around to defend you. You can't be like, well, Brother Roloff or Brother so-and-so. I mean, you can't point the finger at that point. The mental health in these IFB churches is like, it's terrible. I mean,
it is.
You know, and a lot of these girls that were sent, a lot of these kids, not just the girls, but the boys too, that were sent to these Roloff homes, they actually came from abusive homes and were sent to the Roloff homes. And then the abuse continued there. It's like their actual personal lives at home where they were being sexually molested. They were being verbally and physically abused. I mean, this is happening in the churches.
The cycle, and it's like, when does the cycle stop?
Yeah.
I'm excited to kick off this series and have our next survivor next week come on. And I mean, it's really, I feel like this series really is going to be really hard for listeners, but it's very important. No matter how old you are, you can always message our social media, and then obviously our email too. And you also can comment on YouTube. But I'm just really looking forward to letting these survivors come on and share for their story to be heard, you know. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, same. I'm excited.
Yeah, so stay tuned for next week's episode. It's going to be really good. Experience at the Rebecca home.
You can put an isolation room. And we worked on hot fields, so.
My little murderers and state
school at this place.
We had typing. We went to church.
A legal adoption happened.
It's going to be awesome, guys.
So stay tuned for next week's episode.